Kenton Mark.
During the period of North American slavery, buckbreaking was the act to which the slave owner would sexually sodomize and brutalize the black slaves publicly in front of the other slaves. The process would begin where the slave owner or overseer would identify the most defiant male slave, or who they believe was the strongest, or the leader amongst the slaves. The overseer would then gather all the slaves into one area, where they would then tie the strongest male slave to a tree, remove his trousers, having his buttocks completely exposed, then would proceed to rape him. After raping the male slave, they would then savagely sodomize him. It wouldn't stop there. The overseer would then whip him over and over again, right in front of all the other slaves, and also in front of the male slave's wife, family, friends, and children. This process would often end in death. Buckbreaking was more than just a punishment. It was used to control, psychologically break, emasculate, and break the inner spirit of male slaves on the plantation. It was a message to all slaves to show and prove who had the true power, dominance, and supremacy. Buckbreaking comes from the term black buck and breaking a buck, which refers to violently abusing the black man to get him to follow orders. It began on slave ships where enslaved African men were sexually exploited by the slave merchants, and eventually on plantations by their slave owners. Enslaved Africans mostly originated from West Africa, from many different tribes including the Yoruba, Igbo, Mandinka, Congo, and Ibibio. They were brought to the Caribbean as an abundant and cheap source of labor for sugar plantation. Through excruciating and terrifying experiences on the ship, many of the enslaved Africans died before reaching land. For the many who survived, they represent the beginning of the generational anguish and trauma, with a constant reminder that in their new lives, they will be treated as commodity by their owners. There were many historically recorded slave rebellions, to be exact evidence of more than 250 uprisings, involving 10 or more slaves, whose aim was for personal freedom. Four of the most notably are the Stonewall Rebellion of September 9, 1739, the New York City Rebellion in 1741, the German Coast Uprising in 1811, and the Nat Turner's Rebellion on August 22, 1831. Buckbreaking became more prevalent when African slave rebellions had increased. Because of the slave owners' approach on breaking down their slaves by using the form of sexual abuse, it became popular on plantations, and it grew into sex farms, which was also a part of slave breeding to systematically force the reproduction of enslaved people to increase slave owners' profits. Enslaved men were also castrated or sexually mutilated as forms of punishment. This act of buckbreaking eventually spared no male and affected both children and men. Due to the dehumanizing impact, most slaves, after being raped, committed suicide. While slavery has been around for almost since the beginning of civilization, the year 1619 marks a significant period where the largest amount of captive Africans set foot in North America through the British colony port of Jamestown, Virginia. This would be regarded as the start of the African slavery in the colonial history of the United States. It is well documented that the Dutch ship known as the White Lion brought at least 20 Africans, and they were classified as indentured servants. The English settlers at this time also enslaved the indigenous people. Historical documents indicate around this period up to 1620, over 50,000 people were enslaved, many of which were prisoners of war exported from Angola, Southern Africa. Enslaved women and their young child were also subject to sexual abuse and often bearing children for their slave owner. The slave owner would also forcibly pair good breeders to produce strong children they could sell at a high price. Resistance brought severe punishment and often death. Throughout the 16th and 19th centuries during the slave trade, which lasted well over 400 years, millions were kidnapped from the continent of Africa. Africans were captured on their land, brutalized, chained down, forced onto ships, and taken into new lands across the world against their will. Consequently, forced into slavery in the American colonies and exploited to work in the production of crops such as tobacco and cotton. According to historical records, over 12 million Africans were forcibly brought to work on various plantations throughout the world. Portugal and Britain together accounted for 75% of the slave trade. That's over 9 million slaves. The 1860 census reported that African American population of the United States was estimated to be over 4.4 million, of which 3 million were enslaved. This means at least 89% of African Americans lived in slavery. It was on January 1st, 1863, President Abraham Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation, which on paper made the end of slavery in the United States. 30 years before U.S. President Abraham Lincoln wrote the Emancipation Proclamation, the Canadian Slavery Abolition Act of 1833 came into effect across the British Empire. It took Britain to finally outlaw the practice across their entire empire in 1834. Present day, to the people from marginalized communities, specifically African descent and the indigenous people. While slavery ended over 160 years ago, there are still forms of slave master to slave behaviors within our societies, which comes without the physical chains, but yet it comes in the form of psychological buck breaking to emasculate individuals publicly. If you look closely, it comes directly from people in powerful positions: the government, law enforcers, teachers, employers, and the list goes on. It is also often observed in the entertainment industry, such as sports, music, and films. I'm encouraged to share the following lyrics from Sizzla Kalonji's Rise to the Occasion song to remind you of who you truly are. Here it is. Rise to the occasion, look at yourself. They say you are strong, no one can stop you. It's for you to make the best in life. Know that you got the chance. Get up and step towards your goal. It's alright. Fulfill your needs and wants. It's on you to make the best in life. Know that you got the chance. Perseverance for the utmost best should be your preference. Skills of trade and talents is your evidence. Help those who are far off. Teach those in your residence. Life is so real, no time for disillusion. Just like mom would say, love is the solution. Until next time, peace king, peace queen.